And good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of, or another stream of Grounded TV, where we're going to be going over just more of the Trump tariff threat as it's been put by the mainstream media. How many times? I saw a handful of individuals that were definitely worthy of note on CTV recently, to mention Danielle Smith, the Premier of Alberta, and Dominic LeBlanc, a Liberal minister. So we're going to be going over these two interviews to start, and then we'll be getting into just some stuff from today. These two interviews took place yesterday. So without further ado, we'll hit the ground running on these.
Massive trade threat coming from our largest trading partner. Incoming U.S. President Donald Trump is threatening to slap 25% import tariffs on Canadian and Mexican goods in his first day in office on January 20th. So far, it's just a threat with 2 months of runway for the feds to negotiate. But the threat alone was enough to sink the Canadian dollar to a 4-year low earlier today. The Prime Minister is set to meet virtually with Canada's...
Yeah, we were talking about that, I think, like 2 days ago.
Premiers at about 5 o'clock.
Evening, Rob. Big J, eh? That's the name? I like it.
Eastern tomorrow. Earlier, I spoke
I think that would have been my name if I ever was a rapper or a pro wrestler, for sure.
with Alberta's Premier, Danielle Smith, on the message she intends to bring to that call. Hi, Premier. Good to see you as always. Thank you for making the time.
You're welcome, Vashi. Nice to see you.
Just before I got on air to do this interview, I saw a report from Reuters saying that U.S. sources were telling them that energy exports will not be exempt from this tariff that Donald Trump is threatening. Is that your understanding as well?
Look, he's saying it's a 25% tariff across the board, and he wants a few things addressed. He's talked about illegal migrants coming across the border. He's talked about the issue of fentanyl. He's talked about China using Mexico predominantly, but also Canada as a backdoor to start hollowing out their manufacturing sector. And he's talked about how we're not pulling our weight on defense and meeting our 2% NATO target. So I take him at his word that those are the things that he needs us to address if we're going to have constructive conversations about trade. And I would expect it would be across the board.
See, it's nice how based Danielle Smith is. I feel like she just tells it how it is, for sure, out of all the premiers.
How big of an impact, in your view, if this does come to fruition, would it have on Alberta's economy?
Enormous. I mean, when you look at our cross-border trade with the United States, it's 188 billion in total, but the lion's share of that is oil and gas products going to the United States, going to the Gulf Coast refineries, which are tooled for exactly our type of heavy oil. It'd be incredibly damaging. You can well imagine that there would be other jurisdictions that might be able to fill that breach. I mean, we're hopeful that we could make the argument to the Americans that in order to meet their target of bringing down energy prices, that they should exempt oil and gas. But I can tell you, I take this president at his word. If he doesn't think that we're making movement on the things he cares about, then I think that we'd be facing the cross-the-board tariff.
When the last time we spoke, you had, I believe, spoken to a couple of people who are in and around that administration, not necessarily, in the past week or whatever, but prior to. If you are, is it your plan, I guess I should ask first, to reach out to those individuals like Doug Burgum, like Lighthizer, Robert Lighthizer, like who are you reaching out to? And is it your intention to ask for an exemption for energy exports, or to lobby for, the exemption of...
Hey, what's up, AR? And Pigpen, eh, Rob? That's quite the nickname.
All Canadian exports to the U.S.?
Well, my first step is working with the other premiers to get Justin Trudeau to the table, which thankfully Doug Ford has done. We're going to be meeting with the Prime Minister, and we'll all be able to share our collective concerns about what we're hearing. But I would say that the best thing that we could do would be to start hiring a border patrol so that we can guarantee that we aren't having a free flow of drugs and illegal migrants across the border. We have to make sure that we're addressing the areas of Chinese using us as a backdoor to get into the United States and close those loopholes. It sounds like we've done a better job.
See, like since when is she the crazy one for bringing this up? You know what I mean?
Than Mexico, so I think we can make that case. And we've got to see the Prime Minister chart a pathway to meeting our defense targets, because if we cannot solve those things, all of the lobbying in the world is going to come for naught. We've got to address the issues that have been identified as pressure points and alleviate them.
Do you think, though, that the way in which it's being characterized by Donald Trump is justified? And I ask because I understand the pushback on defense targets, but there is one that has been set of 2032. If you look in a relative sense at migration and issues at the border, it is a tiny fraction, like 1% of what's happening at the Mexican border. Surely you wouldn't you wouldn't be insinuating that Donald Trump is justified in doing this, are you?
Well, just saying we're not as bad as the other guys is not going to fly in this case. What I understand is that we've seen a doubling of the number of interactions at the border from people coming across, up to 200,000 a year now.
Hey, Kritamira, how's it going? Welcome back, everybody.
That's significant. And when you're talking about a drug crisis that is not only hitting us, but also hitting the Americans, they want to stop that flow of drugs. When you see that increasingly the open border policies of Justin Trudeau is leading to people coming to Canada as a staging area to enter into the United States to such a point that it has caught their attention, we need to address those issues. We can't downplay them, and we can't play the yeah but game, and we can't pretend that the economic interests are going to override those very legitimate interests. We've got to make sure that we're addressing our own border issues so that can continue to be the longest unprotected border in the country. But I feel like that by identifying those issues, those are the ones that we've got to focus on.
Premier, look, I certainly understand the point about the problem.
It's great to have you all here.
Getting worse at the border, and I've put that to Mr. LeBlanc on multiple occasions. But I don't think that the comparison to Mexico is a yeah, but or superfluous, right? He is applying the same punitive treatment to both our countries when we just have a fraction. And when I say a fraction, I'm not like, being that's not in the abstract. It's I looked at the data, it's 1%, just over 1% of the migration that they're seeing at the southern border. If you're, in a position that you're in as Premier, as a representative of this country, harping on our country and our record and justifying Donald Trump's position, is that not detrimental to our overall effort to lobby him to exempt us?
Well, look, I mean, we have temporary work permits, 4.9 million of them coming up for expiry within the next 2 years. Does the Trudeau government even have a strategy at all for how they're going to be managing that?
I don't think they do at all. I think that's why they're freaking out right now.
That's a lot of people. And if you look at it from the Americans' perspective, they would fully expect that people are going to be potentially coming across the border. That's why we have to demonstrate that we take our border control as seriously as the Americans do. I believe that if we try to change the subject without addressing the underlying irritants, we are not going to be successful, and we'll be facing 25% tariffs in 2 months' time. One of the things I would say is that he's given us 2 months' notice to clean things up, and 2 months' notice.
And that's what I've been saying, right, to Saul, is that these tariffs aren't coming into effect just yet. Like, this is basically a threat. It's a negotiation. I think it's kind of a bluff in a way, because he knows they're going to end up folding to his demands. Like, we kind of have to as Canada. Like, unfortunately, our success is very much dependent on America's success, whether or not we like it, as being, so close and intertwined with them and everything. Like, we wouldn't be where we are today if it wasn't for America.
To address these issues, and I that's what I'm going to argue at the table with the fellow premiers. Let's figure out a way that we can address those issues so we can get on to talking about our very fruitful and important trade relationship.
And I do take your point on the issues as they exist, but just to be clear, are you saying that his threat is justified?
Look, I've been saying that we have a fentanyl crisis in our province, and that's why we've been throwing a ton of resources, not only policing resources, setting up new dedicated enforcement teams to shut down drug houses, to go after fentanyl dealers, and to be able to get to apprehend those who are on warrants. We've been addressing the issue of overdoses for the last number of years to try to curb that problem. We have been raising the issue of the number of newcomers that we are now overflowing into Canada to a point where it's overflowing our ability to be able to absorb them. I have been talking about this for many, many months prior to the new administration coming in. These are issues, and we're not going to pretend that they are not issues. They are issues that are impacting Canadians just as much as the U.S. president sees that they're impacting his citizens as well.
Yeah, I saw that stuff about what Kevin O'Leary was saying, but I don't know. I think for diplomatic relations, that unfortunately, Trump can pretty much get away with whatever he wants to do to Canada at this point, and any American leader can, because Canada's not really in the position to be, being the decision maker. You know what I mean? Like, unfortunately, we kind of have to go with the flow. And I think that Poilievre has a way of being able to strong arm and agree with Trump at the same time. And I think that's what Trudeau doesn't have. If Trudeau agrees with Trump, he seems like he's folding and caving to his demands. But if Poilievre's to do it, it seems like they're just striking a bargain. You know what I mean? Because Poilievre seems like he knows how to, deal with Trump in a way of showing him that we have something to offer.
We have a common interest in addressing it. We have a common interest in trying to get a handle on our border issues and a common interest in trying to get a handle on the organized crime that is bringing fentanyl onto our streets. And if we can work together on a common interest, we'll probably be able to have a very fruitful relationship with the Americans, as we always have.
But with all due respect, Premier, I mean, there was a point in time in which you were asking for immigration numbers to increase to support the growth that you wanted to see in Alberta. And again, I'll put to you, do you think it's helpful to say that Donald Trump, to insinuate rather, that Donald Trump is justified? I get that you think there are problems, but does that justify punishing our entire economy, imposing a 25% tariff? I mean, can you not raise the specter of issues at the border without doing that?
Look, we are supportive of an immigration program that makes sense, that brings people in so that they have a job to go to, so that they can cultivate relationships, so that they can ultimately find a pathway to permanent citizenship. We shouldn't be a conduit for illegal immigration into the United States. That is not a tenable position to take. And the fact that that Justin Trudeau has allowed for some of these issues to get so out of control that it is now affecting our trade relationship, we've got to address the foundational issues. And we have seen this for some time. The premiers have been very concerned that without being able to match some of the concerns the Americans had, that this is exactly what would happen, is that we would end up facing tariffs as well. I think we have a window to be able to address it, to get back to the table, but we have to take seriously the issues that the Americans are raising, and we've got to address them.
Can't you say that that is the case, that those issues need to be taken seriously, and also say Donald Trump is not justified in threatening a 25% tariff on all of our exports?
Well, look, I'm going to put Alberta's interests forward, and our interests obviously mean having a zero tariffs on the border. And I would say that the fact if we could lead with energy and have Justin Trudeau take the emissions cap off, take the carbon tax off, and truly be a partner in energy security, I think that is a very strong bargaining position to have that would allow us to have the broader conversation about the trade flows. But what I'm hearing the administration say is that they don't even want to talk about those issues until we address these underlying problems. I think we have to have a dual track, but I don't think that we can be naive enough to think that we can just argue, well, we're not as bad as Mexico, therefore give us an exemption. That's not going to fly. We have to be realistic about what we're going to take to the table.
Premier, I'll leave it on.
And I think that's a pretty good point from what you had to say there. I think Vasi pressed her in an odd way. I don't know, just that Vasi's tone there reminded me of arguing with Saul a little bit. I'm not going to lie. But, it's good to see how she handled it on her toes. Hey, what's up, Genghis Tron? How's it going? I like everyone's calling each other grounders now. I like that. Hey, Robin, how's it going? Well, welcome back, everybody, by the way. I don't know if I said that already. But anyways, we're going to get into the next video here where Mr. LeBlanc went on power play, and then we'll be getting into some stuff from today.
Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc.
This is yesterday, along with the Daniel Smith interview was yesterday as well. I just wanted to recap these because they kind of have to do with the topic. And I felt like it was, we're going to touch base on where the premiers are at with the tariffs and everything like that as well. And then also got a Canada post-strike update in there, just kind of give everyone when we've kind of been following that for the last while. And I think it's important just to kind of keep note on it. From what I was reading, there's been no success, and we're pretty much in the same point we were before. 11 days ago or whatever when this started. I think 11 days ago, apparently, when they officially announced they're going to go on strike. I don't know when the strike officially started, but yeah, anyways.
Overseas the border. Hi, Minister. Good to see you. Thanks for coming into studio.
Hi, Vashti. Glad to be here.
Did you or anyone else in the federal cabinet get a heads up that this was coming?
I was in the Cabinet Committee on Canada-U.S. Relations when Chrystia, who chairs the committee, was given information on what was posted by President Trump.
So does that mean that your government, that Minister Freeland or you, there was no heads up essentially the incoming president planned to threaten a 25% tariff? I'm asking just because during the campaign,
and not that I was aware of. As I say, I was in the meeting, and those cabinet meetings, you don't have your phone, you're not looking at social media. But when I was in the cabinet committee last evening, that's when we found out, and I think that's when Chrystia found out as well.
Is it fair to say then the cabinet was surprised by this?
Surprised. I think we knew that there would be moments where there would be these sort of difficult circumstances. We'd seen that in the previous Trump administration. So we have been preparing as a government for a number of these scenarios for some time.
You know, every time they say that, what does that mean? You know, my fear is they're going to try and be overly aggressive about it or be overly defensive. I don't know. I just hope that they're very diplomatic about this to try and, you know, keep Canada's best interest forward as they keep saying they are, and they're, you know, delivering coast to coast to coast for Canadians every day, right? I don't know. I feel like Trudeau's the worst delivery guy there's ever been. Whoops.
And we just need to continue to do that work. So nobody is traumatized. We're doing the work that Canadians would expect us to do. And we think that we can work through this with the Americans.
How do you reconcile for Canadians, though, that on one hand, you've got, I think it was last week, Minister Jolie kind of almost bragging that people are coming to us for advice on how to handle Donald Trump. A few weeks before that, the Deputy Prime Minister saying Canada would be absolutely fine. And then the news that was delivered last night. Like, can you understand how Canadians don't feel very reassured?
Canadians are understandably concerned anytime the United States, the incoming administration, talks about tariffs and high tariffs of this nature. It's of course concerning for Canadian workers. The good news is that we have been preparing for this kind of conversation and this scenario for some time. We have seen in the previous Trump administration a circumstance like this that was ultimately resolved in a collaborative way that is in the interest of both economies. We think that there are many reasons why the Americans will understand that this isn't in their economic or security interest, but those are the conversations that we need to have.
Ultimately, what drove that point home in the last iteration that you're referencing was the threat and ultimately imposition of counter tariffs. Is your government prepared to levy those, and how soon?
Well, we don't levy those tariffs until the corresponding tariffs would be in place, if ultimately they are in place. So the president...
I believe that's how they handled it last time, right? Last time Trump imposed tariffs on Canada, they counteracted with a dairy tariff, I think it was, and something else. I can't remember.
Elect has made this assertion. We're anxious to have the conversations with his administration. The Prime Minister spoke to President Trump last evening. So we'll continue to do that work, but any responsible government is preparing for these scenarios. But our hope is that we won't get to that point. But I think the Deputy Prime Minister said today in a media availability I did with her that all of the preparatory work has been and must be done. But as I say, we think we're some way away from having those tariffs implemented, if ultimately they are by the United States. And we're prepared to talk to the administration and reassure them that we share, in terms of border security, for example, which was the subject of his comments last evening, we share that concern with the Americans, and I think we can be very reassuring to them.
And I know you oversee the border, so I have a number of questions on that exact point in a moment. But I just want to ascertain, when you say, for example, that these tariffs could be far off. I understand from a logistical point of view that the president doesn't, officially take office until January 20th. He says he's going to do this on day one. My understanding is, in that conversation you referenced between the Prime Minister and the incoming president, that the Prime Minister emphasized the sort of statistics at the border, right? Particularly around migration, and the fact that we're like just 1% of what they're seeing at the southern border. Good
afternoon, everybody. Great Dominion in the chat. The First Minister should be holding bi-weekly meetings on tariffs until January 20th and possibly beyond. Is that just what they're planning to do, or what usually or was that what they should do? Like what you think they should be doing, or? Sorry, I'm just curious.
What was Trump's reaction to that?
But that was a call between the Prime Minister and the President. I wasn't present.
Wasn't shared with Cabinet?
I wasn't. We don't talk about what's shared with Cabinet. Vash, you've been around long enough to know that. But I do think the Prime Minister told us he had a constructive conversation with the President. It's not going to be the last conversation they have in the coming weeks. So I'm confident, as I said, that we can work through with the incoming administration their concerns around border security, precisely because we share those concerns. That work is done by law enforcement officials every day. We understand the American concern because we share it. Every country, it's a basic element of sovereignty. A country should be able to choose who comes into their territory. We expect that for...
Yeah, like almost like somehow that's somehow racist now. Like, come on. Like, it's just... I just don't get it. Like, I feel like this is what we used to do as a norm all the time. Like, if you're trespassing in a country illegally, you're going to get deported. Like, what's wrong with that?
Canadians, of the work we do, and we understand the Americans want the same thing.
But what I'm trying to figure out, and I understand that you don't want to disclose exactly what's said, but I think Canadians have a right to understand if they're being told that the Prime Minister is making the case on a statistical or factual basis that essentially Canada is undeserving of punitive measures, particularly relative to the concerns he's highlighting around the Mexican border. If that means anything to the president, because those statistics exist, right? And still, we are being treated exactly the same as Mexico. And still, the president is threatening the same very punitive tariff.
The Great Dominion, responding to my question earlier, the premiers need to maintain oversight on what is being done by the federal government. They can't just have one meeting and then assume the feds will carry out their wishes. Oh, okay, that's a good point. And yeah, I felt like that's what they should be doing. Is like, it just seems like they have one meeting, they discuss what they're good. They have they say they're gonna have some kind of plan, or they have a plan, and then they never actually end up doing anything. So it always comes as a shock when they actually end up doing something. But I think it was the one of the strikes. I was pretty shocked when they actually did serve the binding arbitration. I think the railroad strike, because I felt like that was pretty crucial. The fact that there was so many communities relying on the train system for clean drinking water, like that's crazy, because they need all the chemicals like certain compounds like chlorine and other things to clean and treat the sewage and water and stuff. I don't know. I'm not a water treatment expert, but from what I understand, there's a lot of communities that relied on the railway system for clean drinking water, which is just crazy.
On Canadians that will, Canada, that will.
Hey, how's it going, AP?
Have an impact on Canadians, as you outlined. So I'm just wondering, like, is he receptive at all to those facts? Is he reacting to them? Does he know them already?
But again, Vashi, I'm not going to speak for President Trump, and I wasn't part of that conversation. I know that the Prime Minister thought it was a constructive and positive conversation. It's not going to be the last one. Conversations like that will take place between the new
Cryptomeria in the chat. How do I run for government? I can launder money for half the price. Always so quippy.
New secretaries, the new cabinet officers that President Trump will put in place. This work is being done every day between the Canada Border Services Agency, the RCMP, the FBI, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol. So as the incoming administration receives the briefings from the officials that run...
Quite the glaring difference in statistics, if these are accurate. I'm assuming, that seems realistic to me. Like, I always imagined our border was pretty safe and not really much of a target. So I felt like the only reason it's going to become a target is because you have this alleged or potential mass deportation happening in the U.S. And the U.S. has a lot of illegal immigrants right now. And they could be trying to flock here because they could be seeking asylum here, right? We're treating them way nicer at this point. But we'll see what happens, because if that happens, we're going to have to crack down as well. And the Liberals might even have to, because they're not going to be able to avoid it any longer if we do see a mass migration or a mass exodus, whatever you want to call it, of illegal immigrants coming from the U.S. into Canada.
The law enforcement agencies in the United States. We hope that the information will be reassuring to the Americans, because all of the information we're given by the Canadian authorities is that this is part of an ongoing, decades-long collaborative effort. But we're also...
those are CTV numbers. So to me, it seems realistic. Like, I don't think our border is much of a security threat from people sneaking from the U.S. to here anyways, or from here to the U.S. I feel like it's pretty easy just to get through, honestly.
Prepared to increase the resources and personnel precisely to make sure the border continues to remain safe and secure.
Is it though? And I'm not in any way going to present this as this is the same as the southern border. But the last time you and I spoke, I presented to you data that I think is informing the position of President Trump. And that is the fact that in the last year, basically, the number of people who are crossing from the northern border into the United States in between points of entry and being intercepted by police on the other side or law enforcement on the other side has doubled. Why has your government, allowed for that to happen?
Well, that's an important factor in there.
Well, so we understand that concern. We have the same concern about people arriving at the Canadian border as well. Sir? So the Minister of Immigration, my colleague Mark Miller, has taken a number of measures, whether it was visa impositions on people arriving from Mexico. He's tightened up, in some cases, visa requirements on direct flights from India. He's indicated that he's prepared to do more. We're also prepared to work with U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, the RCMP and Border Services, to ensure that flow of people from the north to the south is properly managed. So this is a circumstance, Vashi, that we've seen before. This is a circumstance that we think Canadian law enforcement are absolutely prepared to handle. All of the plans around potential surges are in place. So we'll continue to work with the Americans. We think we have a reassuring and constructive story.
Yeah, I think he's just negotiating and he's playing hardball. This is what he does. He comes in fast and hard
to tell, and our job will be to make sure the Americans understand the work that's being done.
He's even said before, you want to do something they really unexpect. Like a long time ago, I think I was talking to my dad about this because he used to watch Donald Trump interviews for like business ideas and stuff, and he was saying that like Trump one time said, like when you're negotiating, you want to come in and you want to set the tone by being very abrasive and difficult and asking for a lot so that you're kind of winning even if you walk away with half what you're saying you want.
Down at the border.
If your government is so in control, why were those numbers increasing all year? And why weren't the things that you're talking about now, like today I heard you mention drones and helicopters, why weren't they being employed, for example, in May of 2024, when it's about a tripling of the number of people who are caught crossing the border that way from the month prior?
So these come in different cycles for different reasons. The Minister of Immigration, as I said, has significantly reduced the number of people arriving in Canada who ultimately try and enter the United States by tightening up the visa requirements, and he's indicated
but he's doing
that
he'll like 2 years after the boom started,
and he'll continue to do more, Vashi, to bring those numbers down. I have a lot of confidence in the work that the RCMP and Border Services do with their American partners. There are literally daily exchanges of intelligence information precisely to understand the movement of people.
Yeah, Autumn, I think Rob actually brought it up when the stream started, and that was something I was saying is like, I feel like it wouldn't be good for international relations, but I feel like Trump can just do whatever he wants. So I feel like if Trump did it, you know, Trudeau would take it pretty hard, but like, I don't know, I feel like it would somehow backfire for Poilievre in terms of like, I feel like the Liberals could use it as a reason to, I don't know. I'm always afraid if they ever decide to go full authoritarian, what kind of stuff are they going to pull out? And I feel like they would just be like, he's a far right conspiracy. He's going over there and fraternizing with Trump and all this crazy stuff, right? Like, I just feel like that's how it'll end up going. But I just don't feel like it's going to happen anyways. But we'll see, right? Who knows what's going to happen at this point?
Both from the north towards the south, but also from the south northward as well. So this is not a new circumstance, and it's one that there has been a lot of good work done over decades.
Respectfully, the data is new. The data references the last year. That's not, you know, something that happened 5 years ago or 6 years ago. There was something acute that happened over the last year that saw a doubling of the number. That is something that the new border czar raised in local media interviews days after he took office. Are you arguing that isn't something to note, that isn't something different? Like, I don't understand.
It absolutely is a source.
AR in the chat, like the stream if you hate Trudeau, ignore if you love him. You heard it. AR said it. If you like the stream, then you hate Trudeau. If you don't like it, then you must love Trudeau.
A concern. We share the Americans' concern. The good news is that number is coming down and will continue to come down because of the work the Immigration Department's done.
So you anticipate it'll be where it was 3 years ago, 5 years ago? Like, what's the goal?
Vashi, obviously, both the Canadian government and the American government want to ensure that the number of people trying to illegally enter the country is zero. The American government has that objective, so do we. So we'll do the work necessary. The law enforcement agencies in Canada will do the work necessary with their American counterparts to continue to bring that number down as low as we can get it. And the good news is that this work has been done for decades in terms of the collaboration between...
So there's nothing new that's coming to the table then? Like, what are you going to go to Trump with to say, like, here's our plan? Is it just more of the same or something new?
Jeez.
Well, we're going to continue, as we've done, as I said, for decades, share with the Americans the intelligence information we have around border movement. We'll show the Americans the investments that we've made in border services and the RCMP. I said earlier today that the Minister of Finance and I have agreed to increase those investments. The Border Services Agency, the RCMP, have identified additional equipment that they would need in the case of a surge or some kind of increased capacity challenge. So all of those measures are in place and we'll continue to enhance them.
I guess what I wonder, though, on behalf of Canadians who are watching is, if you were so seized with the border and those extra resources were necessary, why aren't they already in place? And if they were, would we be in this position fighting for our economic lives right now?
Many of those resources are in place. We have increased these resources over many years. There are new technologies and new opportunities in collaboration with American authorities. I was briefed, for example, if you're looking at cameras and surveillance equipment, in some sectors it's the Americans that have the surveillance equipment. In other sectors it would be the Canadian authorities, and they exchange that information in real time. So in the real world, this work is done every day, but we understand the American concern. It's a concern that we share. It's a concern we have for Canadians as well. So we think in those conversations with the incoming administration, we're going to be able to show them the good work that has been done and the good work that we're going to continue to do with American authorities.
Do you anticipate that?
Yeah, that's the way I took it. I think I put it in the stream yesterday as he basically was just saying, do your job for the most part. But I think what I was talking about with Saul yesterday too, because Saul had asked me about this, and we were talking about when he was building the wall in Mexico, or when he was going to build that wall, and he was negotiating with Mexico, and he talked about the nice man, the nice suit, and all that stuff. You know, he did the same thing. He threatened them with these massive tariffs and said, if you don't do what I want you to do, you're going to be subjected to these incredibly large tariffs. So Mexico ended up using their military to reinforce their border. So I feel like that's what he's trying to do, is trigger some kind of response. I don't know if that's the right response, and maybe if it forces us to have to use our military to reinforce our own border, but if that's what it takes to stabilize the country, then that's what it takes, right? I guess that's better than just neglecting the problem or pretending it's not a problem at all.
That you will be able to secure an exemption from these tariffs. Has anyone given you any indication as of yet that that could be the case?
It was less than 24 hours, Vashi, since the president
He's
was
been
on
talking
social
about it
media.
during the entire campaign.
Sure he has. And the Prime Minister spoke to him last night, and we're going to continue to work with the Americans. Obviously, that's the objective. In the previous circumstance, the tariffs were removed reasonably quickly. Our hope is that we can work with them to not see those tariffs imposed, of course.
Okay, Minister, I'll leave it on that note. I appreciate your time as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anyways, that's it for the LeBlanc interview there. We're going to get into some news from this morning now, and then we got some from just recently. And by that point, we're going to have some great stuff just dropping in the evening news cycle as well. We'll get to.
Over $3.5 billion in trade flows across the U.S.-Canada border every single day, from big items like cars and trucks to smaller things like mouthpieces for musical instruments.
The effect on this tariff, if it happens as advertised, will be catastrophic.
David Harrison sells roughly 2,000 of his patented brass mouthpieces a year, and 75% of his customers are in the United States.
For us, it'll mean that our customers won't be able to afford our mouthpieces, or will choose not to purchase them. And if we lose a substantial portion of our U.S. market, that would be enough that we might go to business.
Businesses on both sides of the border are warning of the devastating consequences these tariffs might have to both companies and workers.
25% is a massive number.
Nicholas Mulrooney is the CEO of Bond Bakery Brands, which owns several commercial bakeries that export products south of the border.
We've had to work with our customers in the past with commodity spikes, inflation. This is just the next bump in the road.
Mulrooney is also the son of former Prime Minister Brian Mulrooney, one of the architects of the North American Free Trade Agreement. He is urging the federal government to make this issue a priority and negotiate closely with the incoming administration.
Seeing the intimate relationships that...
Are you guys calling Trump daddy right now? Is that really what you guys have resorted to? Really?
That he's had with President Reagan, President Bush. These are very impactful negotiations that go on. So I just see yesterday's news as a tactic.
The bottom line is it would mean a recession for our province.
Politicians of every stripe.
That's what Wow Canoe thinks there. From what I understand, yeah, it would really hurt certain industries very hard. I don't know if it would mean a full recession for our country, but I guess for Manitoba, they rely heavily on it there.
Men from every province warned about the potential impacts of 25% tariffs from the United States. President-elect Donald Trump is threatening the measure as he claims thousands of people are pouring into the U.S. from Canada and Mexico, bringing crime and drugs.
I found his comments unfair. I found them insulting.
It's like a family member stabbing you right in the heart.
Senior government sources tell CTV News in a call last night, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau told Trump our shared border isn't the problem.
This is something that we can do, laying out the facts, moving forward in constructive ways.
According to the Americans' own numbers, in the last year, encounters at the Canada-US border have accounted for just 1.5% of the total when you include the Mexican border. More than 21,000
Yeah, but they're forgetting the point where apparently that's double what it used to be.
pounds of fentanyl have been seized at the southern border.
Like, would it be instant recession across the whole country, though, or would it just affect certain provinces a lot more than others?
While the amount stopped on its way from Canada to the U.S. was just 43 pounds.
We think we have a reassuring and constructive story to tell, and our job will be to make sure the Americans understand the work that's being done at the border.
In the first Trump presidency, Canada dealt with U.S. tariffs on our steel and aluminum. That experience and the renegotiated NAFTA is why some are calling for another Team Canada approach. The Prime Minister is holding a virtual meeting tomorrow with premiers, but getting everyone on the same page could be a challenge.
I don't think that we can be naive enough to think that we can just argue, well, we're not as bad as Mexico, therefore give us an exemption. That's not going to fly.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is willing to put partisanship aside, but with conditions that put Canada first.
Trudeau's got to axe the carbon tax.
I love hearing Canada first so much in the House of Commons today.
He's got to lift the production cap on Canadian energy. He's got to rebuild our military and secure our borders.
The Canadian government did slap counter tariffs on the U.S. last time.
It's not a bad point.
The bottom line is it would mean
President-elect Donald Trump has promised to impose 25% tariffs on all products imported from Canada to the U.S. And while some industry workers are worried, New Brunswick's premier is hopeful the tariffs won't actually land.
We are optimistic that, as the last time that Trump was president, the tariffs that he put in place didn't last very long, and we're hopeful that they will see the light again at how damaging this would be to the American economy. The American economy relies on petroleum products from Canada and from New Brunswick, and it would hurt them to go this route. And so I think we'll be able to convince them that these tariffs are not a wise move for their people or their economy.
One lobster processor is warning of a severe impact if these tariffs do go through. His company ships 75% of its frozen lobster to U.S. buyers.
And that's what I mean, is like, isn't lobster considered like a more of a finer delicacy, or is that just a West Coast thing because it's not as easy to get here?
I think it's really important that we pay attention and that we focus on the integrated nature of industries such as ours. Obviously, we're not the only ones in that situation. I mean, we could talk about the oil and gas sector, agriculture, auto, obviously, come to mind readily. But it's I mean, the stakes couldn't be higher, and I mean, there's no way to sugarcoat this. If this comes to pass, it would have very severe consequences.
Premiers are meeting with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau this week to discuss the planned tariffs, a huge concern for a province like New Brunswick, which sent more than 90% of its exports to the U.S. in 2023.
Today is day 13 of that ongoing Canada Post strike, and we've got some bad news. A special mediator who is trying to bring
So I got like a Canada Post update in here for you guys.
Both sides together has now said, nope, can't do it, at least not yet.
This is from this morning.
Suspending mediation efforts, saying the two sides are far apart on critical issues. Here's Steve McKinnon. He is the Trudeau government's labor minister, keeping a close eye on the situation. Here's what he had to say. He says he's hoping that the pause in activities by the mediator will put pressure on both sides, Canada Post management and the union, to reassess their positions. McKinnon spoke to reporters last hour in Ottawa, saying he is extremely frustrated. So far, the Trudeau government does not have any plans to directly intervene, no back-to-work legislation, but he certainly appreciates that the longer this goes on, the more frustrating it's getting for Canadians.
These parties have had access to the best mediation services that it is possible to have. They have had time, and it is like both parties don't realize that the business plan and business proposition of Canada Post hasn't changed. That is an obvious fact for all Canadians. And at the same time, they need to realize that they need to reach a ratifiable agreement.
All right, let's go to Arda Zakarian. She is in Toronto, in the east end of the city. She's at a rally being held by Canada Post workers at one of their big facilities in Toronto. Arda, good to see you as always. What are you hearing from people?
Thank you. Good to see you too, Todd. So what we're seeing behind us is a rally in front of the...
Well, actually, as one of our viewers pointed out in a comment on one of our videos, something I didn't realize is that Canada Post isn't actually funded by taxpayer dollars. They're completely self-sufficient. And that's why they can't give these guys the raise. They don't have any money. They're broke. They're like beyond broke. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, they don't make nearly enough money, not nearly as much as they used to anymore.
Eastern Avenue facility here in Toronto. Actually, it was much bigger just a few minutes ago because CUPE, members of CUPE decided to join, and they're having a women's conference, and they said, let's go and join and a show of solidarity to our members from CUPW. What we are hearing from them, I actually had a chance to speak to the Toronto local president, and he said they are ready to negotiate. However, it's Canada Post that's not negotiating with them, and Canada Post says that that CUPW is the one that's not responding to negotiations. So it's a little bit of he said, she said. However, here's more from the president himself.
I personally believe they never had any desire or any want to negotiate at the bargaining table. They will not budge and not give fair jobs to any future workers. We're fighting not for only ourselves, but future workers for the young people of Canada.
The thing is, they already make, like I think I was pointing out last time, they already make pretty good wages. I just feel like, you know, as someone who doesn't have a job quite like they do, I'm just like, oh, you guys are really without, right? I don't know. Maybe I'm just cynical.
55,000 postal workers continue.
Like, if there's safety concerns, that's a different thing. I completely understand that. But if it's just about the pay, from what I understand too, they're saying it's not even just about the pay, it's about the concept, the fact they're promised it. They were told it was abstained because of COVID, and now that date has come and they still are being told it's not going to happen.
To be on strike. It started on November the 15th. It's now November the 27th with no end in sight. Back to you.
Yeah, and Arda, I mean, 10 million packages or more that are sitting undelivered at facilities like the one you're at in Toronto and across Canada. And of course, it's the busy holiday season coming, Black Friday as well.
That's right. And the president says he really does feel with everybody who's relying on those packages, who maybe have ordered presents for one another, for their children, waiting for those packages to come in the mail. And
I feel bad for everyone who ordered stuff and didn't know this was happening, because I know people where that happened to, and they've ordered stuff like forever ago, and it's just sitting in a big main hub in Vancouver, and it's going to be there for how long? Who knows?
don't know if they're going to get them in time for Christmas, or how they're going to sort through all the mail, all the packages that are sitting in those facilities. Certainly, once the strike is over, there's going to be a lot of work to catch up. But for right now, they said that they are focused on getting fair wages for Canada Post employees. That is their.
Anyways, that's it for the Canada Post update there. Back to the tariffs.
Face an unprecedented threat from President Trump's potential tariffs. And what is the state of things here?
So this is from today's QP, guys.
Here in Canada, our economy is weakened. Our borders are weakened. Our military is weakened. And most of all, our Prime Minister is weakened. Why can't we have a carbon tax election so Canadians can choose a leader with the brains and backbone to protect our economy and put Canada first?
Yeah, today's QP was pretty intense, guys, for those who didn't see it this morning. Or this afternoon, depending where you live.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, while the Leader of the Opposition focuses on himself and on me, we're staying focused on Canadians. We're investing in the kinds of things that are going to help people. We stood up for dental care. We stood up to deliver a school foods program. We're moving forward with more spaces at $10 a day childcare, all things that the Conservative Party voted against. But most recently, Mr. Speaker, they've announced they're going to be voting against the GST break for Canadians over the next couple of months, something that's going to help people at a time where they need that little extra help. But he doesn't care about helping Canadians. He just wants them to suffer more, so maybe he has a chance.
I think I was saying earlier, I feel like Trudeau wants us to suffer more because he won't call an election. With the worst polling numbers the Liberal Party's seen in decades.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, he's lost control of our borders. He's lost control of immigration. He's lost control of spending.
That's right.
And with that erratic performance, we now see that he's lost control of himself. No wonder foreign leaders believe they can walk all over him. They see him as a weak, incompetent leader who does not even have the support of his own party.
Yes.
Why won't he put the country first for a change, allow a carbon tax election so Canadians can have a prime minister who will protect this country?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
You can tell he stood up all night against the mirror trying to practice that line. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, we've got our sleeves rolled up. We are fighting for Canadians every single day. We will stand up for good Canadian jobs. We will make sure we continue to have great relations with the United States as we build a stronger future on both sides of the border. We're going to continue to deliver the kinds of things that matter for Canadians. Dental care, free insulin, school food programs, all programs that Conservatives voted against, and now they're going to vote against a GST break for Canadians right across the country for the next few months. That's not being there for Canadians, that's being there for himself.
This is such a lunatic, eh?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Just to prove how weak and out of control he's become, he just engaged in a mass hallucination, listing off a bunch of programs that actually don't even exist outside of his own head. But if he's not prepared to stand up for the country when it comes to trade, then why don't we have a real election about taxes? He can run on his tiny 2-month tax trick, and I'll run on my common sense plan to axe the tax and axe the sales tax on new homes. How about a carbon tax election now?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
We saw it perfectly clearly just now, the fact that he is trying to gaslight Canadians. He just said that the dental care program, to pick one, doesn't even exist. Well, tell that to the 1 million plus Canadians who've gone to see the dentist, many for the first time in years, because
I don't know where he's getting these numbers. If someone wants to be able to help me out here in the Discord and link Trudeau's sources here, because I couldn't find them. I couldn't find 1 million Canadians being helped by this program.
The Canada Dental Care benefit. This is what he's standing against. He's trying to convince Canadians that everything's broken while he forces his MPs to vote against a GST break that's going to help Canadians.
It's not going to help Canadians, actually, because it's $6.3 billion to pay for this GST break that they're planning on doing. And it's just really going to drive up deficits even more. So it's just, it's like he doesn't understand that spending is the problem. You got to stop spending. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you can't, it blows my mind. Yeah. Anyways, let's get back to this.
On the expected impact of the proposed tariffs on the economy, we're joined by financial.
I don't think any of the Liberals can. I don't know if it's that they can't math or they just are cherry picking statistics and certain professionals that are just telling them what they want to hear.
Advisor Alan Small now. Alan, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. What is your reaction to this? I mean, this could destroy so many livelihoods.
Yeah, it's hard to sort of react. I guess initially. We've seen this before, right? I think 2016, I guess the former president or president-elect now, he talked about tariffs at that point in time. We've seen this before. Whether or not that actually comes to fruition, I guess, is what everyone is trying to figure out. I guess we have to take him at his word. And if this were to happen, I know the Premier was saying that this could cost a lot of jobs. Ontario alone is one of the largest, I guess the province for sure alone does a lot of business in the United States, let alone the country. So yes, industries or sectors of the market such as energy, such as manufacturing, cars, autos, and not only that, all the businesses that feed into those businesses. So the auto parts makers, like a Magna, how are they affected? So the ripple effect just goes on and on and on. And so the hope is that,
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with the chat, Rob. It's been doing this. I think it's the server for the program, like the source I'm using. So it's like a connected to a server that's connected to the YouTube channel that runs it. And I think there's some issues going on with it lately. The last week or so, we've been having some issues, and I can't quite figure out why. I don't think it's anything in my settings. I think it just has to do with connectivity.
Cooler heads will prevail, that we can, I guess, the prime minister or whomever can speak to, I guess, the president-elect and come up to some agreement. But I guess if you know the MO of the president-elect, this is kind of his starting position, and hopefully he will work back from that.
Yeah, as you talked about, that ripple effect, it is real. If this, in fact, does happen, are you hearing from small businesses who are worried?
A lot of small businesses are worried, definitely. The question I get a lot is from investors, you know, is this going to affect the stock market? Is this going to affect investments? And really, the effects are very specific, meaning certain industries will be affected, others won't. So technology, for example, certain tech businesses, certain tech stocks weren't affected at all when that announcement happened.
That's what I'm saying, right? Is like that's what I thought, but like, could that still trigger a recession nationwide? Is something I don't know.
Tech stocks actually went higher yesterday, whereas other businesses like cars, for example, GM stock went down 8% after the tweet or the information was spoken.
Is it crazy how a tweet can lower a stock value of a large company like GM by 8%? That's insane. Like, I guess a tweet from a certain official, but.
So it's just really specific as to what type of business you're in, what type of where you are in the economy, manufacturing versus tech, or what you're building, and then, as you said, the ripple effect leading into that business. They're going to be affected, and so it's going to reach a lot of people.
For sure, Alan.
We do have some tech. I think like EA Games or a couple odd companies, but nothing compared to the U.S.
I wonder what this is going to mean for the Canadian dollar, already not in a great place, and then interest rates. Are you watching for an impact there?
We've already seen it. And when the news of the 25% tariff came out, the dollar immediately fell below 71 cents, something we haven't seen in quite some time. If we were to continue to lower interest rates, Bank of Canada were to lower interest rates a quarter point, 50 basis points, and if the U.S. doesn't lower, our dollar is going to fall substantially, in my opinion. It can fall substantially. Then you combine that with potential tariffs as maybe as early as...
It's already at 70%, so he's saying it could fall even more substantially?
February, end of January, I think our dollar could fall even further. So the risk, of course, is that we see a dollar falling below 70 cents. And in my opinion, that could lead to more inflation because obviously whatever we import into our country becomes a lot more expensive, leading to the possibility of perhaps a resurgence in inflation. So there's a lot there. Our dollar definitely affects many things. Currency affects many things. And right now, I got to believe that the Bank of Canada is thinking somewhat differently about what they want to do in December and in the new year, maybe go a quarter point at the most, and maybe pause from there, kind of take a wait-and-see approach. I wouldn't be surprised if Tiff Macklin made that some sort of announcement that we're cut in December and then maybe wait and see what happens in the new year. But make no mistake, GDP growth in Canada is slow. So at the same time, he wants to, or the Bank of Canada wants to stimulate. So how do you stimulate when the dollar is weak and you want to bring interest rates down, but you have all these other factors in the air? A lot.
Boudreau, former RCMP Deputy Commissioner, who now heads up his own public safety management.
So this is how secure is the Canada-U.S. border?
Firm. Mr. Boudreau, thank you for joining us.
This is from just a couple hours ago.
Pleasure.
So, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of Mr. Trump's concerns in a moment, but I want to begin with
Good evening, Charlene. How's it going?
Whether or not you are surprised that the once and future U.S. president would express such concern about what is the world's longest undefended border.
Not surprised, at least, and anyone that actually tracked the electoral process and listened to what the former president was talking about, and looking at Mr. Trump 2025 project, a 900-page document that clearly highlights some of his vision as to his next presidency and some of his expectation. He clearly talked about public safety as being one of the main issues that he wanted to focus his attention on.
Okay, so one of the main issues, let's break it up now based on what we saw on the that post that he put onto Truth Social, beginning with drugs and fentanyl. Just what is the volume of illegal drugs transiting across the Canada-US border, and from Mr. Trump's perspective, from Canada into the United States?
Well, the thing is, if you look at the latest statistics with regards to the actual fentanyl seizure by the American authorities coming from Canada, compare that to Mexico, it's actually 0.1% of fentanyl seized in the United States that was coming from Canada. So therefore, these numbers do not actually reflect some of the sentiments that the American authority feels about Canada, and that could be misguided just to look at the sheer numbers and fail to consider the larger picture with regards to how our American counterparts are affected and feel that Canada is not delivering on safety and security for their borders.
Okay, so a disconnect when you actually look at the number coming from Canada into the United States. What about illegal migration, though? Because we've certainly seen an increase of migrants trying to get into Canada at irregular border crossings, rather. But what about the flow into the United States? Are we looking at a marked increase there?
It's ostensibly over the last 3 years, there's been a slight increase, but nothing compared to Mexico, where in Mexico, for instance, you were looking at ostensibly about 1.5 million illegals trying to enter the United States, compared to a mere 25,000 over the last year coming from Canada. So therefore, again, numbers are not telling the whole story. And the other element, Michael, that you need to factor in is in Project 2025 for the soon President Trump, the clearly highlighted throughout his electoral campaign that he wanted to actually expel from the U.S. over 11 million illegal migrants. So in Canada, we need to factor that in.
Which is an insane amount. That's an insane amount. Like, that many people is like 25% of our country.
Because the last time President Trump was elected as president, he clearly triggered movement of illegal migrants heading towards Canada. If you recall the Roxham Road, within the following year that Trump was elected, over 35,000 people enter our country to Roxham Road. So it created a huge problem, and I suspect that this policy with regards to expel over 11 million illegal migrants out of the U.S. will create a huge pressure in Canada. And the other factor is that the President-elect Trump wants to actually ask American authorities to effect all of these deportation, and therefore would create a huge problem because of a lack of capacity in the U.S. to deal with border issues. So if you look at it holistically, President Trump is pushing the pressure on both the northern and southern border and asking neighbors to ostensibly take the load off the U.S. authority that will be busy, I suspect, dealing with this public policy of expelling.
Yeah, like they're not saying get ready for what's happening, get ready for what's coming. Essentially, if we don't get ready for what's coming, it's going to be even worse with the amount of people flooding over the border, plus the tariffs at the same time. I feel like we're going to end up having to do whatever we're asked to do. More like 100%. Like it's a unfortunate relationship we have with America. We are very reliant on them and their protection.
All of these people out of the U.S.
Okay, so let's follow that through then. The numbers are not huge, Canada into the United States, but this migration crackdown, which Donald Trump is promising, will potentially create a huge challenge for Canada. So why then do you think that when we hear from Mr. Trump's incoming border czar, Tom Homan, and he is from a border town, he describes our shared border as, quote, a huge national security issue. Why make that argument from the American perspective if, as you say, and I think Canadian authorities are preparing for this, the greater pressure will be migrants from the U.S. into Canada rather than the other way around?
Correct. But they also, you look at, historically speaking, some of the cases that we had with the U.S. with regards to international criminal syndicates. And there's been, over the last 10 to 15 years, a lot of frustration building south of the border with the American authorities about the slow judicial process that we have in our country. Case in point, the Jordan Supreme Court decision with regards to the time limit for an accused to be processed through the court system, which resulted in a lot of dismissal of very important cases that law enforcement agencies on both sides of the border have worked on. The other decision, Stinchcombe, which with regards to full disclosure of prosecution and prosecutors' material, also affected the relationship between the United States and Canada, because the United States have clearly indicated that they are rather frustrated with how slow the judicial system is within our country. This issue was also flagged by the Canadian Association Chiefs of Police that clearly indicated that they needed additional tool to be able to tackle modern and current transnational criminal organizations. So therefore, this is also permeates through the discussion with regards to the lack of the perception of the lack of border capacity and the judicial system in Canada to deal with all of these issues.
Mm-hmm. So perhaps more than just the actual numbers, but as you say, the judicial impacts.
Yeah, so like it's not about what's happening now, it's about what's coming, and we're not anywhere near prepared for it. And I feel like that's something really of note. We know what our border is completely underfunded, it's understaffed. More resources need to be allocated to it. What I was saying to Saul is with the NATO, with like defense spending, is, you know, we could put this towards defense spending, right? In a sense of like, you know, it counts as national defense spending, does it not, to reinforce your border? And if we're going to rely on the military to have to reinforce the border in order to handle the large waves of migrants coming over, like that's going to be, you know, I really hope that this situation goes smoothly. But like I said, anytime a mass deportation happens, it never happens smoothly. It's always a very messy, dirty process.
A weak prime minister who's lost control of everything. He's lost control of the borders, lost control of immigration, and lost control of spending. Recently, it came to light that the deficit is
replaying the same thing.
And Ottawa is where we begin.
So this is it's just more on Canada Post. I think it's the same thing though. So we're gonna go to this.
Se le coloca 25% de impuesto.
So Mexico threatens counter tariffs towards the USA. So
a las empresas que ya
que va a permanecer el tratado.
I guess I didn't really think about it. It's all in Spanish.
Sus empresarios, sus empresarias y sus gobiernos. O sea, lo que está preparando, pues si llega a haber aranceles, en que México también subiría aranceles.
Okay, so Mexico's saying they'll raise tariffs as well, basically.
U.S. President-elect Donald Trump suggested this week he could slap tariffs on Canada once he's in office. His proposed tariffs would not be the first Canada has faced from the U.S.
I was expecting his voice to be way deeper. I don't know why.
Some exports heading south of the border were hit by tariffs in Trump's first term, and Canada hit back with tariffs of its own.
One of the really important things is that we be all pulling together on this. The Team Canada approach is what works.
Donald Trump imposed tariffs on various steel and aluminum products from Canada in spring 2018. At the time, the White House cited a lack of progress in negotiations around the new NAFTA trade deal as the reason. Canada retaliated, imposing tariffs of roughly $16.6 billion on steel, aluminum, and hundreds of other products from the U.S. And those other products varied widely. Things like yogurt, maple syrup, and tomato ketchup, along with kitchenware.
Yeah, I was reading about maple syrup. I was like, is there really that much that we sell across the border? Like, how much Canadian maple syrup is there in the world?
Candles and sleeping bags. That fall, the Canada-U.S.-Mexico trade agreement was finally...
Freeland looks rough compared to how she looked before, like when she came into office, eh?
...negotiated, but it was not until spring 2019 that the tariffs were finally lifted. Following Trump's remarks this week, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre called the tariffs an unjustified threat and called on more action by the federal government to stand up against what he called unfair tariffs. He was also asked about his own stance.
Are you willing to retaliate?
If necessary.
Yeah, and that was very well put, I think. Never heard this reporter before. He's kind of it weirds me out.
What else happened in politics today? The Trudeau Liberals tabled a bill to implement their GST holiday proposal. Bill C-78 would remove the GST on items such as restaurant meals, snack foods, and children's toys for a period of 2 months, beginning December.
Freeland's always looked rough. I just think she looks worse, though. Like it looks like they've aged 20 years.
14. But the plan...
Her and Trudeau.
...to send out $250 rebate checks will be voted on separately. The government had to split their proposal, the result of concerns expressed by both the Bloc and the NDP, who want to expand eligibility. Talks between Canada Post and the union representing thousands of striking workers have broken down. A federal mediator appointed to oversee negotiations suspended talks today, saying the parties are currently too far apart to successfully mediate. The Labour Minister, Steve McKinnon, is expressing his disappointment with how negotiations have gone so far.
Parties need a bit of time to rethink their positions and to come back to the table with a renewed determination to get a deal, and these are the exact messages I'll be transmitting to them.
I want to tell you and your family that we will make a lot happen with this mandate, because that's what you...
So what do you guys think about the Nova Scotia election results, eh? It's pretty crazy how much of a majority he won.
Have a right to expect. You and your family are counting on us to stand up for you, and we will.
And finally, that was the Nova Scotia PC leader Tim Houston celebrating his victory last night. Voters in the province giving Houston and his party a super majority in the province's legislature.
Super majority, eh?
Nova Scotia's NDP party will form the official opposition, while the provincial Liberals finished third, losing several seats, including their leaders, Zach Churchill.
The leader lost his seat. Jeez.
Yeah, and a lot of hyper.
That's rough, eh? That's what I mean. I feel like we're going to see that a lot more. Even with the BC election, I was saying, it was still kind of a victory for the Conservatives to go from 2 to 44 seats. That is insane and unheard of. So you got to think that that is still a huge win for anyone who wants the country to go fully blue. So I think it's good for you if you're happy about Nova Scotia results. I know we got a mixture of people in the audience, so hope you're happy if that's who you voted for. I know we were kind of disappointed here in BC if we voted for Rustad. So, but anyways, we're going to get to this next video now.
Verbally, the best thing I heard was from the U.S. ambassador to Canada.
Yeah, they figured out one night. Well, how many people are in Nova Scotia, I wonder?
Whose advice was, take a deep breath. You're so right in your setup to this, Todd, when you say this is...
So there's only 1 million people in Nova Scotia as of January 1st this year. That's like a fifth of what's in BC.
How Trump plays the game. It's Trump being Trump. Everything's a negotiation. Everything is about a transaction, and he's trying to set things up. The last time he blamed Canada not for the drug problem or...
Yeah, it's like 1,060,000 or something.
For immigrants, he said we were actually a security threat. That's why he was going to impose tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, because it was about the only loophole that he had left. We have a trade deal with the Americans. Not only did Trump sign it, he wrote it. And for him to say, well, he can just ignore it is pure Trump. But of course he can't.
Mark.
But we're in a negotiation process for that as well. So Trudeau is, by the way...
I thought BC meant bring cash.
I think that Trudeau, very much like Premier Legault that you just referenced, is getting very good coverage from this. It does take a lot of the oxygen out of the room when you have Trudeau dealing directly with Trump. They spoke for 15 minutes. That's a sign that only Trudeau can do a certain number of things, and the provinces are going to be getting together. We used to have meetings of the Council of the Federation. It was something that was put together years ago. Mr. Trudeau hasn't shown a lot of interest in working with the Council of the Federation, but he knows how tough this is, and he also sees it as a political opportunity. He gets to appear very prime ministerial. Poilievre has been fighting back. He came up with a very sensible series of propositions yesterday, got a little bit partisan as he tried to blame the Trudeau Liberals, but he knows that he's not going to have much of a role in all of this unless he plays his cards intelligently, which is what he was doing yesterday. Singh and the NDP showed up so late yesterday with even the slightest idea on this stuff. they're really having trouble communicating anything.
Yeah, they're still figuring out the speaker in BC. I can't find anything. The last update was November 3rd.
And I don't think they're sure yet how to play this or how to deal with the Liberals on it. Are they going to continue to keep them in power? Is this going to be another reason to keep them in power? We'll see.
Tom, what's so wrong with the Canadian government doing more on illegal immigration and illegal drugs? I mean, you know, if we take a step back, I mean, is it so unreasonable? Oops. We understand the situation in Mexico, very different than Canada, but there are issues in our country as well. I mean, is a way not out of this for the Canadian government to say, look, we hear you, we're going to do more, we're going to crack down, we're going to bring in, you know, more resources, and then maybe it's a win-win for everybody?
Absolutely. But let's not forget that Canada already did act to repair a mistake that was made by the Trudeau Liberals. Remember, they removed the requirement to have a visa when you were coming in from Mexico. So what happened was lots of planes coming in from Mexico that were full of people, and they would leave empty, or with people who had paid almost nothing for a seat to get out, because those people had all disappeared, not into the hinterlands here. They were in the United States. So the Americans were very much aware of that. But that's a thing of the past. How much is left? There are people who are illegally helping those in Canada cross back into the United States. We know about that. And there are tragedies once in a while that remind us that it's taking place. Todd, to your question, nothing wrong whatsoever in dealing with that. In fact, it could save lives, because often when you're trying to transit people, as we saw, you know, through fields in the dead of winter in Manitoba, they're going to wind up dead. We had the same thing in the St. Lawrence system near Montreal. Again, a whole group of people died as they were being brought in illegally to the States. So yeah, that's good, and it helps us answer the American request. But the American request actually has nothing to do with fentanyl, because there's a drop in the bucket of the fentanyl that makes it into the States actually comes from Canada, and a drop in the bucket of the people transiting illegally into the States comes from Canada. This is about negotiation. And that's why...
Well, it's also about the statistics have gotten worse over time, right? That there's like a lot more than there was before, even though it's not as much compared to Mexico, it's still a lot more than it used to be.
I think that Canada would have been a lot smarter. You know, Doug Ford was out there first, Trudeau followed suit, you know, willing to jettison Mexico at the drop of a hat, with very little consideration for the long-term effects. So I think that a little bit of solidarity would have been in order, and that's what we're going to see this afternoon. Mr. Trudeau's going to sit down with the provincial and territorial premiers and start talking about the effects of this. But again, it's a very good opportunity for Trudeau to play his role as Prime Minister.
What's the word?
Which he sucks at playing that role, by the way. It's the only role he couldn't get in the drama club.
Best case scenario here, Tom, if you had to kind of jump ahead to the beginning of the Trump administration in January, February, and the ongoing conversations here, how do you think it's going to play out?
Well, you know, the way it was explained when Europe was turning its nose up on a trade deal that had been negotiated with Canada, I think Chrystia Freeland said something along the lines of, look, if you can't sign a trade deal with Canada, who can you sign a trade deal with? The Trump administration, the smarter people there know that. They know that we're an important trading partner, that several dozen states have Canada as their biggest trading partner. So if there are problems that arise there, there will be lots of states and their state governments and their governors and the legislators and the local businesses saying, hold on, this is a really bad idea. Anybody who thinks about this, you know, adding 25%.
Mexico's 2023, 128 million they reported.
To what? Aluminum and steel that goes into everything that gets built in the States, whether it's a car or a washing machine, that's going to have 25% added to it. That's just added straight to the price that the consumers will be paying. Trump claims he doesn't understand that, thinks that this is about money being paid into the U.S. Treasury with no effect, but it's actually just another tax on U.S. consumers. So we'll see whether or not Trump holds to this. I don't think he's a total idiot, and I do think that he realizes that he can play this game, but not as far as he's been talking about.
It's important that we not get caught, as I think President Trump is trying to position us to be caught, in a place where we are trading amongst ourselves.
Look, we've had serious concerns about issues related to money laundering, organized crime in British Columbia. It doesn't justify the tariffs, but this is a serious issue.
We have a lot of arguments on the trade side why we should maintain the most profitable trading relationship in the world. So I'm pretty confident we'll get the premiers on board.
At this very moment, the Prime Minister is kicking off a meeting with Canada's premiers. It's an urgent virtual sit-down coming less than 48 hours after U.S. President-elect Donald Trump.
So this is an hour ago. This was posted on CTV, by the way, guys.
threatened to slap a 25% tariff on all Canadian imports, citing concerns about the border. Here's exactly how he framed it, posting to social media, quote, "This tariff will remain in effect until such time as drugs, in particular fentanyl, and all illegal aliens stop this invasion of our country. Both Mexico and Canada have the absolute right and power to easily solve this long simmering problem. We hereby demand that they use this power, and until such time that they do, it is time for them to pay a very big price." So will everyone work together, or is the Fed's united Team Canada approach being tested? Treasury Board President and Transport Minister Anita Anand sits on the Cabinet Committee on Canada-U.S. Relations. She is with us live now. Hi, Minister. It's good to see you. Thank you.
It's funny because everyone says everyone comes at her saying she looks like a Muppet all the time.
Thank you for making the time.
Hi, Vashi. Great to see you.
We've just been talking about how premiers are meeting as we speak, and they have conveyed to us, Minister, they'd like to see your government present a specific plan to address President Trump's concerns, particularly at the border.
Canada's like 41 million of citizens, so who knows what we're actually at.
Cabinet colleagues, by and large, whom I've interviewed, have said something along the lines of, we've done it before, we can do it again, we share the U.S.'s concerns. When will you share with Canadians your plan, Minister?
Well, let's take a step back. We have been negotiating and working with the Trump administration in the last iteration. We have a threefold plan moving forward. We are leveraging
what does a threefold plan mean?
Existing relationships through a unified Team Canada approach. That includes not only the premiers with whom the Prime Minister is meeting right now, but it includes all levels of government, labor leaders, business leaders, and we all together need to form that Team Canada approach going forward, a unified front. Secondly, we are going to be leveraging the mutually beneficial economic relationship. Right now, 60% of crude oil in the United States is Canadian in origin. Quebec electricity powers thousands of homes in the United States every year. We need to stress the impact.
See, I knew it's energy, right? We sell a lot of Canadian energy, from what I understand.
That proposed tariff would have on both sides of the border be very negative for U.S. businesses and U.S. citizens as well, including those who voted for President Trump.
I need the liberal dictionary. I need a liberal translator.
And then finally and thirdly is the border. We have been fortifying the border. We have been investing not only in the public servants at the border, but also in the technology and the surveillance at the border. So that threefold approach, Vashi, means that we are strong now and we will continue to present that unified,
Yeah, but what does threefold mean?
Strong approach going forward.
If, though, Minister, your government is doing all the right things as you just laid out, why is the president threatening to do what he is?
The president...
This means 3 times. What does that mean? 3 times? What's a 3 times plan?
The president's modus operandi is to raise that temperature early in the game. Our modus operandi is to stand back and say we negotiate before we retaliate. And we will at all times defend Canada's sovereign interest. It is our sovereign right to do so. We will take every measure possible, spare no expense to protect Canada, to protect Canadian businesses, and to protect Canadian workers.
You mentioned in the last part of your answer before the border, and I wanted to pick up specifically on that point, Minister, because that is something that in this post to social media in which he levied this threat, the president-elect certainly focused on. And I know you said that, you're fortifying, your government has fortified the border, that you've increased resources, but I do have to put some data to you that challenge the veracity of those points. The first being that there has been a doubling of illegal migration in the last year. That's intercepted on the U.S. side, coming from Canada. That's the statistics from the Border Patrol on the U.S. side. But beyond that, they're also saying that 358 suspects on the terror watch list were arrested on the northern border at ports of entry in the fiscal year 2024, 3 of which were encountered between ports of entry. And by comparison, the number at the Mexico-U.S. border was just 52. Isn't it reasonable that President Trump would raise this concern specifically? And what more beyond what you already are doing are you ready to do?
Well, also, I feel like it's Trump's posturing, right? It's his strategy, is showing that he's there for America. And this is kind of putting America first by saying he'll threaten these other countries who aren't going to pull their weight with tariffs.
Well, Vashi, I can present you with statistics as well that support the point that I'm making, which is that we are investing in our border. We are investing in our human resources and surveillance equipment at the border. Immigration officers are, in fact, cracking down with 600% more misrepresentation investigations in 2024 over 2023. We've
Yeah, I got the Christmas mug back now.
Intercepted human smuggling rings as well, Vashi, and we are seeing progress at the border in these respects. In addition, we have the Criminal Code of Canada, which is a beacon of the legal system here. We will continue to enforce the criminal code, whether it's with regards to drugs or other illegal substances. And finally, in terms of immigration, let me say that if you come to Canada illegally, you will be deported. And so at all times...
Whoa! Where'd you hear a liberal say that, huh?
It is our sovereign right to determine who comes into Canada, what comes into Canada, and we will spare no expense at defending our...
That's what I'm saying. If it gets bad enough, they'll start addressing the problem, because there's only so much you can neglect the house burning down.
Our border, our country, our citizens, and our businesses.
If that is totally true, then why, like point blank, are there more than 350 people on the terror watch list in our country getting arrested at the American border trying to head into the States? Like, on the face of it, regardless of the resources that are there already, like, isn't that problematic?
As I said, Vashi, the relationship between Canada and the United States is very strong, and the FBI and U.S. Customs are working every single day with the CBSA, with the RCMP, and with border officials on each side of the border. We are working together to ensure that the longest undefended border in the world remains protected. That is a mutual obligation that we both have, and we'll continue to work together with the United States to ensure that that border is secure. But again, I want to stress that Canada will spare no expense to ensure that the resources necessary are being directed towards the border. I sit as president of the Treasury Board. I see submissions from Minister LeBlanc coming frequently to ensure that those resources are flowing to the border where they need to be in order to ensure that that $3.3 billion worth of goods and trade and services pass through that border every single day for the benefit of businesses, while at the same time we are defending the border against illegal migrants and smuggling of any harmful substances.
Can you quantify, Minister, you're right, you're the one who sees the bills come in, right? Can you quantify how many or how much extra resources are headed to the border? I imagine if I'm, someone in and around President-elect Trump, that's a salient detail, right? So far, no minister has provided any of those details. You're actually the first one to say there's additional resources headed there.
Actually, I don't want to suggest that this just happened this week. What I'm saying is, since I've been Treasury Board President in July 2023, I have seen hundreds of millions of dollars flow to the border for the investments in surveillance equipment, investments in the CBSA. We signed a collective agreement with them in June. And those types of resources are what is going towards fortifying the U.S.-Canada border on the Canadian side. And let me tell you,
but the president-elect, with all due respect, doesn't feel like it's fortified. He's seeing a doubling.
Hey, it's up 2 cents. How's it going? No worries. We're going to be going for a bit longer still. Probably another 45 minutes or so. I got quite a bit we got to cover tonight.
Of illegal immigration. It's not anything compared to Mexico. I wouldn't insinuate it is, but it's a doubling versus a year before.
We need to go back to that 3-point plan that I laid out at the beginning of this discussion. We are going to leverage our existing relationships. We are going to demonstrate the security measures that we have placed at the border. We are going to ensure that the mutually beneficial economic relationship between our two countries is on full display and notice for the United States. We did this in the last Trump administration. When they put in 232 tariffs, we retaliated. We did this during the pandemic when they tried to stop the flow of PPE across the border. We were able to show them that our raw materials went towards making that PPE, and we brought those goods across the border. So Vashi, we know how to negotiate before retaliating, but we will not hesitate to retaliate if the situation demands it.
I have one question about those negotiations, and it has to do with the meeting that's happening right now with the premiers, right?
Which we're going to be getting into right after this. Freeland and a couple others have made announcements on this meeting, which I think after this question, we're just going to skip to the next video here.
I think there is a feeling that some parts of the country might try and play off each other. So if, for example, Alberta can secure an exemption for crude exports, or, Quebec can...
Here, we're just going to get to the next video
it's
here.
It's important that we not get caught.
There's a lot to cover, so...
Competent leader who does not even have the support of his own party.
Oh, no, sorry, guys. Here we go.
Okay.
So this is happening right now. This is the meeting that they're referring to of the premier's meeting with the federal government.
Bonsoir, bonsoir. Larger than China, strong, on which about CMP, Ford, a meeting of the first ministers across Canada, Minister LeBlanc and
This is really bad quality. I'm just going to go over to cpac.ca. Well, whoops. Just going to go over to cpac.ca here because it's going to be a lot better quality. Just give me 1 second, guys. Just 1 second. Throwing it back up here. There we go.
Hey. The meeting of the First Minister host soirée. Okay, bonsoir. The Prime Minister has just hosted, together with Premier Doug Ford, a meeting of the First Ministers across Canada. Minister LeBlanc and I joined him, and we were also joined by Deputy Commissioner of the RCMP, Mark Flynn, who's with us here. It was a really good, really important meeting. We talked about the Canada-US relationship, and our central agreement on which everyone was agreed really from the outset was that this is a time when we need to play for Team Canada. We need to work in a united and coordinated way. We agreed that we need to be smart, strong, and united in meeting this challenge. We spoke principally about the border and the Canada-US trade relationship. When it came to the
So this is from like half an hour ago, by the way, guys.
Economic relationship, we talked about the fact that trade between Canada and the United States is balanced and mutually beneficial, that Canada is the largest market for the United States by far, larger than China, Japan, the UK, and France combined. Many premiers talked about how important their provinces are for US exporters. And we also talked about how the United States depends on us for many essential products. In particular, we spoke about energy. We talked about how
bringing up the Munsters, Terry.
The US relies on Canadian oil, Canadian electricity, Canadian critical minerals and metals. Premiers referred to how that dependency on Canadian energy is particularly important today at a time when AI is such an important force.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a springtime election, guys, if I had to put money on it.
For the economy of the future, and AI is so power hungry.
So are you.
We also
Freeland.
spoke about how Canada and the United States are aligned when it comes to China and China's unfair trade practices, China's intentional policy of capacity. We spoke a lot about the border. Minister LeBlanc will have more to say about that, but our shared view was that, of course, the United States has the absolute right to control who enters the United States, just as Canada has the absolute right to control who enters Canada. We agreed that illegal drugs, especially opioids, are a scourge for both of our countries, and that we need to continue to work hard to ensure our border is safe and secure, and to really crack down on illegal drugs. Alors, on a eu une excellente conversation avec les premiers étaient là. On a des équipes canadiennes dans nos deux gagnants une frontière. La même chose pour les deux aussi.
OK, là-dessus, beaucoup Flynn respecter une discussion ministre de l'importance cherche au premier exemple avec les
French.
Ça autre que l'important particulier avec nous mesures ont pris avec entièrement d'avant dans la GRC et Madame Friedrich currently in place to a considerable extent on border security. We spoke to premiers about the security currently in place at the Canadian border. We believe that there is a circumstance where we can make additional investments to reassure Canadians that all of the measures necessary are in place and will continue to be in place. We have a lot of faith in the work done by Border Services officers, by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. We appreciate the work of provincial police forces. The Prime Minister spoke to premiers about the important work of collaborating with law enforcement agencies. The Ontario Provincial Police, Sûreté de Québec are valuable partners for the RCMP, and work with them in ensuring that all of the measures are in place. And finally, we spoke about additional measures, additional investments that we can make in supporting the work of the RCMP, of Canadian Border Services Agency. Premiers spoke about their desire to collaborate with us on issues around border security, including some of the measures taken by Mark Miller on immigration, on tightening visa requirements for persons coming from Mexico, dealing with increasingly a number of cases involving fraudulent pretexts where people get a visa to come to Canada but ultimately are trying to enter the United States. We'll continue to tighten the screws on that process to make sure that we continue to have an immigration system and borders that in fact support the integrity and security that Canadians and Americans work on every day and have for decades. So it was a
I feel like all these workshops and summits are just how to say a lot without saying anything.
Positive conversation, and we're going to continue to ensure that we work with premiers in the coming weeks to set a Team Canada approach in terms of border security, national security, and ensuring that the immigration system is orderly. Merci beaucoup.
Minister Freeland, how can you say that you're on the same page if in a statement afterwards, Doug Ford said, quote, that your government has been slow to react and stuck on the back foot? Is that really on the same page in your mind?
I can only speak to the conversation we had, and the conversation we had was very positive. We were very united, and we all really agreed that right now what Canada needs is for us to work together.
I wonder how united they really were.
That we need to be strong, we need to be smart, we need to be united. And let's be clear, our country is facing a significant challenge. We have opportunities as well, and I really believe that we can meet this challenge successfully. But I am also absolutely certain that the way we meet this challenge successfully is by presenting a united front, especially when it comes to our conversations with our American neighbors.
Some are questioning Trudeau's strength as a leader to deal with another Trump administration. Is this Trudeau's make or break moment?
Prime Minister Trudeau is our country's elected leader. He was very effective in dealing with the U.S. throughout our time in government. He was an effective partner for Barack Obama. He was an effective partner for President Trump. He was an effective partner for President Biden, who
Was
is
he?
still president. And I have every confidence that he will be absolutely effective in dealing with President-elect Trump. He did have a conversation with the president on Monday, shortly after the president's tweet. That, to my mind, speaks to the effective and open lines of communication. Now, I want to be clear to everyone. This is a challenge. Canada's relationship with the United States is always a challenge, and I don't want to minimize for a moment the gravity of the challenge we now face. But I also think it is important for us as Canadians to have confidence in ourselves, to recognize the strengths our country has, to recognize that certainly we depend on the United States, but the United States also depends on us. And to recognize that we benefit from our relationship with the United States, they also benefit from their relationship with us. And now is really a moment for us not to squabble amongst ourselves. For sure, the people on that call, we disagree with each other about a lot of things. And one of the premiers who I will
That's an understatement.
not name, I'll allow him to speak for himself,
Talking about Ford.
said with a little bit of a chuckle, I can't believe I just agreed with Prime Minister Trudeau about so many things. So we're open about the fact that there were different parties on that call. There were Liberals, there were NDP premiers, there were Conservatives, and the differences are real and significant. But there really was a strong agreement among every single person on that call that this is a challenge, and that the way we meet that challenge and the way we serve Canadians is by being strong, smart, and united, and by playing for Team Canada. And that will certainly be the approach that our government takes.
Madame Freeland, avez-vous l'impression d'abord parler du Front Uni, deuxièmement,
I don't know if you guys feel at ease with Freeland in charge of these matters, but
Position, et c'est que
et des mesures street. Canadians have every interest in ensuring the integrity and security of the border. That's a foremost responsibility for our government. And that the Americans share that concern is also very normal and has resulted in decades of daily collaboration. What I think is important now, and the premiers spoke to this as well, is showing Canadians visibly and demonstrably the presence of law enforcement at our borders, talking about the good work that the federal policing units of the RCMP with partners in provinces and municipalities do around drug trafficking, around fentanyl, around some of the drug labs that have been taken down and organized crime, but recognizing that the concern at the border probably militates in favor.
Let's see if there's anything more
would not
in here.
sur l'abordabilité du décider.
Okay, that's it for that. Okay, we're going to get into Wab Canoe's response here.
Good evening, folks. So I just got off a call a short time ago with the Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister LeBlanc, the American Ambassador, and the premiers of every province and territory. It's my job, of course, to stand up for you, the people of Manitoba, and make sure that our economy is strong and that our communities are safe. So the message that I shared with all the folks on the call today is that we as Manitoba are happy to play a role in a unified Team Canada approach to strengthening the relationship with the United States of America. And in particular, you know, this week I've been calling on the federal government to increase their investment in the RCMP here in Manitoba, as well as law enforcement generally. We know that this would help to respond to concerns that are being articulated around the border. But the point that I made to the Prime Minister and to the premiers on the call is, listen, Manitobans have long been talking about drugs being an issue in our communities. This is going back many years. And so what's the downside? If we invest in law enforcement and we crack down on drug trafficking here at a time when that message might be well received in the States, at the same time, we're going to make communities safer here in Manitoba. Of course, I also raised the importance of the agriculture industry. This is the backbone of our economy here in Manitoba, and I made the point that in the prairies, Manitoba in particular, the ag sectors that are important to us need to have that strong voice at the table. One of the other points that I raised, of course, and this touches on ag, but on many other issues too, is that we need to have a clear strategy when it comes to China. Of course, the conversation right now with respect to President-elect Trump has a lot to do with the border and has to do with drugs, and we want to show that we're strong on that. But we know that the United States of America is also reorienting their relationship on trade with China. And here in Manitoba, given the current dynamic, we need to see a clear strategy. And then the other point that I made was, again, to reiterate that we need to hit that 2% target when it comes to the proportion of our economy that we spend on our military. This is not just something that shows the Americans that we're a good ally and a trusted partner when it comes to national security, Arctic security. This is also something that's good for our province. We have a lot of folks who serve in the Canadian Armed Forces here in Manitoba. We have a big aerospace industry. We have bases here. More investment in the military will also help us here at home.
See, I do like him for at least say, like, that's the thing of any NDP ever. I think Wapkiw is the one we seem to have the most common ground on certain things.
And so this is a message that I
certain things
shared, and overall, I think it was a constructive conversation with the other leaders that is going to be the first in an ongoing set of engagements between the premiers and the federal government. So that's a high-level description of the conversation that we had and my contributions to it, and I'm happy to answer questions that you may have.
That's what I mean, is like any NDP MP, like I feel like if this guy was leading the federal NDP, like Pierre would have more of a worry. But at the same time, he's got a bit of a sketchy past, and there's a lot of stuff about him, so who knows?
Tariffs might not come to pass. Whether the president might be bluffing or talking up more than he's willing to act.
I think there's a widespread agreement around the table that we're taking this very seriously. And I think a lot of the folks who've spent time with folks in the Trump orbit are saying that this is for real and we should plan accordingly. But my message to you as Manitobans is this: if we invest in law enforcement here at home and we crack down on drug trafficking, if we're able to ensure that we have a strong border, if we show the Americans that we're investing in the Canadian Armed Forces here at home, what's the downside? Yes. These are all priorities that Manitobans support. These are areas where we want to see investment that would help us here at home, making communities safer, helping to grow our economy. And if at the same time that we make those investments here in Manitoba, that it's going to reach an American audience who wants to hear those things, that's how we get to that win-win situation that people want to see.
With the other premiers in lockstep with some of your views and about the 2% NATO target, about boosting spending and hiring from your city?
Yeah, I think the premiers are united. And while, of course, each individual premier has their own regional priority and specific interests that they're bringing forward, I do think that there is widespread support for hitting that 2% target of spending on the military. And part of that is because, hey, when you come to Manitoba and you invest in the military, you're going to be investing in Shiloh and 17 Wing. Hopefully in the future it also includes investments in Churchill and other parts of the province. But when you go to the north, you're talking about opening up new infrastructure opportunities. The same in Atlantic Canada.
Well, he just seems unscripted, right? And I think that's what really stands out for me with a politician. Regardless if I agree with everything they say or not, I respect them a lot more if they can actually, you know, if you can tell what they're projecting is actually their own thoughts, right?
In Western Canada, right? So every region, I think, seems to agree that there'd be a local benefit to increased investment in the military. I also think that further investment in the RCMP and law enforcement is something that a lot of the premiers seem to respond to. So again, a lot of regional flavor, but a widespread, I think, consensus that showing that we're strong when it comes to keeping communities safe and cracking down on drug trafficking here in Canada does seem to be one of the many points that we're united on. Well, I think I'll leave the specific back and forth to the people who are on the call. I think I can share publicly that the federal government indicated to us that there will be more investment coming to the RCMP. In particular, there's some conversation around how the RCMP can support the border. So we'll be looking to engage with that in greater detail. So for instance, does that become a special deployment of the RCMP devoted specifically to the border in southern Manitoba as one example? The special deployment that I'm talking about here would mean that you have the existing RCMP resources preserved to police the communities where they're already present, and we're talking about new resources. So I just want to make clear, not talking about pulling Mounties away from the existing communities in Manitoba where they're already at work, but rather an addition of new folks being trained, new folks coming to the front lines to help deal with that situation. I think drones are a part of that conversation as well. I guess aerial surveillance, there's a lot of technology that's needed there, but at the end of the day, it really comes down to boots on the ground, because the drones and other pieces of technology will need to be operated by people, and we'll also need that intelligence support to be able to do the analysis and pull all those pieces together. So it does seem that there's I think I can share with you that it does seem like the federal government is interested in engaging on that piece of it, and that's where I'm
engaging. But does that mean that they dictated the situation and you're just along for the ride, or did they actually hear you out? Was it like Trudeau's, was it like Trudeau hearing out those 20 MPs in his caucus meeting?
Kind of pushing a bit further to say, yes, of course, invest in the border, invest in RCMP, CBSA, other law enforcement agencies, but also let's focus on our own communities. We have real issues with drug trafficking across Canada. Unfortunately, Manitoba is not immune to those. And let's just make sure that if there are additional resources coming out of the federal government, that some of those are going to be going to crack down on the drug trafficking problem and the addictions epidemic that we're seeing.
Was there any talk about the political messaging here? Because the indication from the Trump administration seems to indicate Canada is the weak partner at the border, but I think other premiers will tell you drugs and guns come with them across the border.
It's a two-way street. Yeah, I think that when we talk about securing the border, when we talk about this whole relationship right now, I think that premiers are going to have a strong role to play, a leadership role, actually. And part of that is because of our bilateral relationship with our counterparts as governors, but also just because people in the Congress, the senators, people in the House of Representatives, they understand where the jobs in their districts are tied to our provinces. They understand in Tennessee and Georgia, North Dakota, Minneapolis, Minnesota rather, that trade with Manitoba is good for their home districts. So I think the premiers have an important role to play here. And when you talk about political messaging, the fact that we have that diversity on the political spectrum represented around.
Oh no, there's the NDP coming out.
That premier's table, I think that's just a net benefit for us to be able to engage with the incoming administration. Because you look around that cough table, you have New Democrats, you have Liberals, you have Conservatives, you even have a couple nonpartisan voices around that table. And so for us to see this incoming administration, and as long as we're united, we're playing that Team Canada approach. If we got some people who maybe are speaking the same language as the incoming administration, I think that helps all of us to strengthen those ties.
Have the premiers developed any sort of plan to get back together to get the governors on board, because the governors in the northern states are opposed to tariffs?
Yeah, I think we will be working hard to cultivate the bilateral relationships. The premier to governor relationships are an area of focus for the people around the cough table, so the leaders of the provinces and territories. I know that part of those conversations are straight up economic trade conversations. But I think given the current reality, we're going to be looking to broaden that out to also, are there joint initiatives we can work on that talk about drug enforcement or that talk about, the border on each of our respective sides of it. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity for premiers and governors to work together. And I know that will take a regional flavor. So obviously, my counterpart in New Brunswick is going to be very interested in what's happening in Maine. And, I'm obviously very interested in the Dakotas and Minnesota and Illinois and the Midwest. But I also know that there's a unified approach across all the premiers that we want to work together on cultivating the state level relationships too. You mentioned at the start about that strong united approach. Any commitments now on what that will look like? Also, ideas and recommendations, but any commitments in terms of what that looks like? Yeah, I think there's an agreement around everybody on the call, including the federal government, that we're going to be unified when it comes to that Team Canada message, and we're still at the same time going to pursue our own unique relationships and points of contact that we have with the United States of America. When it comes to specific follow-up, we're going to, I think, reconvene a few times, both as the premiers ourselves and also, I believe, with another First Ministers meeting in the future. And then we'll be going to D.C. again, right? Like potentially as a group of premiers. We haven't landed on a specific date, but basically sometime after the inauguration, we're looking at a joint trip to make that case to the incoming administration that trade is really important for the U.S. when it comes to trade with Manitoba, but also we are your closest ally, right? And to just reaffirm the nature of that allyship as being founded strongly on security, that's kind of an essential prerequisite for a good relationship these days too. So there'll be plenty more follow-up. I'm just kind of listing off a few examples of what we're currently working on right now.
Any plans to send former Premier and Ambassador Gary Doer down south?
I wish I could hear the reporters talk. I can barely hear the reporters here.
In the immediate future to deal with some of this?
Well, definitely turning to him for continued advice, and he is very helpful. Mr. Doer continues to have an excellent understanding and network in the U.S. and in D.C. in particular, to be able to advise us right now. And, the priority right now is on Manitobans. It's on your jobs and the safety of our communities here. And so to have Mr. Doer helping out with Team Manitoba, if you will, it's just a huge asset that we have as a province.
Well, I like that the approach is, okay, how do we meet these demands? That's what it is. We're not trying to work around it any other way. It's just, we're going to have to meet these demands, right? Which is honestly kind of what I expected, but I was worried the Liberals were going to do something stupid because of how incompetent they are and end up making the situation a lot worse for us, or a bigger mess for Poilievre to clean up.
Not going to send him down to D.C. next few weeks or anything?
I think in terms of going south again, that is on the agenda. I do think the consensus right now seems to be wait until after the inauguration, potentially even to a point when some of the cabinet secretaries are sworn in. So we're looking probably post January 20. Yeah. And after this meeting with Justin Trudeau, do you think he is the right individual to lead Canada? Well, my focus is on leading Team Manitoba, and I'm going to play the role on Team Canada. But I know that people here in this province want to see us make communities safer. They want to see us continue to grow the economy and for us to have good jobs here. And so we're going to be cultivating that relationship at the state level, on Capitol Hill, the relationship with the business leaders in the United States of America, just making sure that this relationship continues to be strong.
Today in question period, you called out the opposition for one of the questions they asked and for not naming Trump, President-elect Trump. I'm wondering, what does that signal to you? I don't know if you can comment on that.
It just shows a lack of seriousness, in my view. Again, Donald Trump is the president-elect of the United States of America. He is threatening 25% tariffs here on Canada, and we have a responsibility to respond. You've elected a government that is serious and that is willing to stand up for you and your jobs. We will do so. We're also going to ensure that there is a strong trading relationship with the United States of America, and that we're going to have that security relationship as well for a generation today and a generation tomorrow as well too. So again, a serious approach when it comes to the relationship with the United States of America means that we have to be able to speak plainly and to talk directly and in a mature way with Mr. Trump, with Mr. Trudeau, with our counterparts at the state level and in the other provinces. This is not the time for tiptoeing around. This is a time for a serious approach to protecting our economy, to protecting our communities, and standing up for Manitoba.
Agree with that.
Yeah, you probably will. Yeah. Alors finalement, juste pour ajouter en français.
So anyways, that's all really. He's the only premier to come and give an announcement since the meeting concluded. So I'm assuming we'll hear more on tomorrow, which it is right now. It is November 27th, if you're watching the replay of this. And November 28th, I'm expecting we're going to see the rest of the premiers respond and elaborate on how this meeting really went. I know Doug Ford was kind of caught going into the meeting a few minutes before. It's like a 5-minute video, but the audio is pretty bad on it, so I didn't really want to play it. This is like the only official press conference or announcement any premier has given since the meeting concluded. And hats off to Wab Canoe for arranging this press conference. This press conference was set up to happen as soon as that meeting was over. So hats off to him for arranging that, because I'm assuming it would have been his team who scheduled this. So, you know, the other premier should have done the same. But anyways, thanks everybody for tuning in. That's pretty much everything we're going to be covering tonight. So thanks again to everybody who liked the video and subscribed. And we'll be back tomorrow. We won't be back till about for sure tomorrow. Won't be on till about won't be streaming till 3:45 p.m. We'll be doing the show same time slot we just did here. So thanks again everybody for tuning in. We can't do it without your support. Unfortunately, Saul wasn't able to make it tonight, but hopefully he'll be able to join us tomorrow. But thanks guys for watching and have a great night.